Soundboard is a production of the Austin Audio Lab.
Understanding the sound of your voice and utilizing all your resources to get the best sound. It's all happening now on Soundboard with Mark and Gabe.
Welcome everyone, and thanks for tuning in to episode 2 of Soundboard. Soundboard is an audio production podcast hosted by myself, Mark Stelter, and a man who needs no introduction if you already know him, Gabe Alvarez.
On today's episode, Mark is going to be discussing why your voice sounds so different when you hear it recorded and played back to you than it does in your head.
And later, Gabe follows up on last episode's What I Heard segment to talk about what you've got. So with that, let's press play.
So why is it that I think my voice sounds like this?
And it actually sounds like this. As much as I wish I really had that Barry White sound, the reality is a bit different. But why is that the case? I mean, if I look into the mirror, it's not like my eyes see a substantially different version of myself than what everyone else sees. So why do my ears hear something so very different? They're both senses, after all, and I've been relying on them for quite a while now. The answer lies in the manner in which we perceive sound, which, in this instance, is twofold. The first is what you might expect, with the sound waves of your voice being conducted through the air and reaching your ears externally, just like any other sound. The second is actually the internal vibrations of our vocal cords being transmitted directly through our own bone and tissue to a bone in our ears called the cochlea. Now, the cochlea is a hollow, spiral-shaped bone located in the inner ear that is essentially responsible for translating sound waves into electrical impulses that can then be interpreted by your brain. In both instances, the sound is reaching the cochlea, but because the vibrations of our vocal cords are traveling internally, the structural properties of our own heads actually amplifies the lower frequencies. So when you hear your own voice in a recording, you are only able to hear the sound waves passing through the air without the internal vibrations of your vocal cords and are hearing your voice the way everyone else does. If you want to hear an example of the opposite effect, try plugging your ears and speaking at a normal volume. Now, of course, the sound is not completely isolated, but you are drastically reducing the external sound conducted by air that your brain is able to register. You can really feel the difference of your internal vibrations and what makes your voice sound like your voice. Now, to take this one step further, there are actually headphones that operate entirely on the ability of your cochlea to register internal vibrations. Bone conduction headphones. You heard that right. Headphones that utilize the conductive properties of your skull to transmit audio by way of internal vibrations that are translated by your cochlea and sent straight up to your brain. Man, that's a great name for a metal band now that I think about it. Bone conduction. Anyways, there are several pros and cons to this approach. The audio quality is not as robust as you are sidestepping the use of your ears to pick up external sound, which is, kind of the point of ears. That being said, the fact that bone conduction headphones are at all viable, I think is incredibly impressive. Additionally, because you don't have anything physically in your ears, the headphones sort of just sit in front of your ears, on your cheekbones, your regular auditory senses can pick up what's going on around you just as easily. I'm sure we've all been in a position of seeing someone look and talk at you while you have headphones in, only to take one out and ask, "Oh, hey, sorry, were you talking to me?" And then if you're like me, they give you an awkward look because they were definitely talking to the person right behind you. So you put that headphone back in and pretend the whole thing never happened. But if you're out and about, they can also be very helpful to maintain your spatial awareness, like hearing a car that ran a red light as you were about to cross the street. Bone conduction headphones can also be especially beneficial for individuals that suffer from hearing loss. particularly if they have any damage to their eardrum. You see, the way the vibrations are processed essentially fill the role of the eardrum, allowing these individuals to hear stereo audio in a way that they would otherwise not be able to. Interestingly, intensive medical treatment for severe hearing loss operates on much the same principle. One form of treatment, called a cochlear implant, actually bypasses the damaged portions of the ear to deliver sound signals directly to the auditory nerve. A sound processor, often implanted behind the ear, captures external sounds and transmits them to electrodes implanted in the cochlea, just like a normally functioning ear would do. Then those electrodes do the work of stimulating the cochlea and sending those electrical impulses to the brain, which in turn recognizes them as sound. Major Deus Ex vibes. Or cyberpunk, I guess, if you're not old enough for that reference. So the reason our voices sound different when we hear them in a recording actually illustrates just how sensitive our senses can be. The way we perceive vibrations, both through the airwaves and through our actual selves, our flesh and bone, makes a huge difference on how we sense the world around us.
Now, I know I don't really sound like this.
But understanding how integral a simple vibration is to my conception of my voice is pretty eye-opening. Or should I say ear-opening? Anyways, it really puts into perspective how we all have a truly unique take on everything we experience.
So last episode on Soundboard, I took some time to revisit a field trip I'd taken out to Pedernales Falls State Park, and I took that opportunity to share what I heard along the way. If you missed that segment, we encourage you to go back and take a listen to our previous episode, and if you missed the sound effects we released from that field excursion, don't worry, we've got a link to our Central Texas Streams and Creeks royalty-free sound pack in today's show notes. Now, last time I repurposed my field audio and produced a segment that I felt best represented my own experience navigating, exploring, and recording those sounds. As a producer, in this case when it comes to producing a podcast, it's a critical skill to develop. How best to take the assets you have, whether they be interviews, sounds, or music, and extract and develop the narrative that makes sense of it all. In my experience, this holds especially true when it comes to producing nonfiction content. You may end up with 4 hours of raw interview footage and 2 hours of ambient sounds that you need to condense into a 15-minute segment. When it comes to work like that, there is a craft. Choosing the pieces that represent the story you want to tell, while allowing the story that is actually being told the opportunity to come through, while still sort of fitting your creative vision. Now, the mechanics of a project like that are pretty easy to teach, but in practice, those questions of what do I need, and where do I need it, and what must be cut, I think can only be answered within the context of each individual project. And that's all well and good and a very interesting topic to explore, but if you follow our work, you'll know we spend a lot of time producing fiction content. If you come into the podcasting ecosystem as an amateur, and there's no shame in that, anyone who ever developed a talent for any pursuit started as an amateur or a hobbyist, then you probably know very well that you will work, at first, with very limited resources. And that's a huge challenge. It's a huge barrier, and sometimes that barrier prevents a project from ever progressing beyond the initial pre-production idea. But as you persist in your pursuit, you will eventually develop the technical skills. You will eventually gather the resources, whether they be equipment or software or libraries of sound and music to realize your project. And to me, this is where the most valuable skill of all emerges: the ability to make the most of what you have. In my own life, I can recall an endless string of memories asking some authority what the best piece of equipment to fit my need would be. What is the best microphone for recording? What is the best handheld recorder for fieldwork? What is the best program for writing scripts or producing audio? And the best answer I ever got, that I ever get consistently, is the one you will use. And I think that really cuts to the truth of anything, maybe not just the technicalities of audio production. The best mic is the one you will use until you know all of its idiosyncrasies. The best recorder is the one you'll carry with you and use. The best software is the one you'll learn. The best sound effects to collect are the ones you will use, which brings us to today's exercise. While the second season of our sci-fi podcast Star Called travels through the pre-production pipeline, we've been hard at work at another program, a Western podcast called Grimwell County. Now, we'll have some more information on both of these projects soon, but for now, I want to take the opportunity to put our mindset into practice. Make the most of what we have. So to continue with our theme of Central Texas field recordings and a Western fiction project on the mind, we'll build a quick trail scene using pieces I've recorded on the fly. As with any canvas, its emptiness can be intimidating at first. I like to start with a simple background layer, just to get some texture. I'll use this clip I recorded of cicadas buzzing in a grove. It's virtually nothing, but it immediately adds a lot of depth to our scene. We're somewhere warm, maybe even hot. It's midday. There's something languorous to it, and maybe that's just my bias as someone who grew up in the South. And this is nice, but I'd like a little bit more complexity. I want to feel more that I'm in a dynamic space. Even if future layers will end up obscuring this effect to an extent, at least we have the option of evolving this sound beyond one clip. And when it comes through the scene or the mix in the end, it will come through. So in my mind, I'll define our center channel as our position on the trail, and I'll shift this cicada track toward the left channel by some completely arbitrary amount. Not all the way out there, but just enough off of our current position that it's distinctly to our left. That leaves our right channel a little empty. I'd like to balance that out. I want this scene to feel like we are occupying a space between two similar but discrete ecological zones. So I'm going to add another track. This time it's a more sparse recording I got of some bird song. And I'm going to shift it right by an arbitrary but lesser degree than the cicada track. And to my taste, it feels like we could be on some bend in the trail, or, we're at a boundary. There's a tree line approaching us on the right, and maybe there's a smaller grove of denser trees off the trail to our left. Now, honestly, this sounds pretty alright, but it's a little off balance for my taste since we swung out the cicada track so far. So to tighten this up, I'm going to take this clip of a gentle stream I walked past. I'm going to push it into the right channel, but I'm going to drop it very low in the mix, and I'm going to push it pretty far right. I want to fill up the right channel with enough texture to make a good attempt at matching the density of our left channel. The cicadas are coming through. It's pretty solid. It's a constant sound. The bird song kind of comes in and out. And I think adding this stream over here on the right is going to give us it's going to round out our presence here. This end result, it's not bad. It's not bad. Would we want to send this off to land in a big budget industry project? No, probably not. But for a project built on assets I already had sitting around, it's not a bad starting point. Because it's a start. It's a foundation to develop and build on. And this really could be the base of anything you can imagine it to be. The backdrop of a lone gunslinger's travels. The baseline of a rural town. The setting of an air show. If you let yourself imagine and experiment, you will find countless opportunities to create new inventions. And we didn't even do anything to these tracks except kind of slap them together. It's the ethos of sound design, to be flexible and be adaptive and get the most mileage out of the tools you have before you. Because there's not going to be a tool that exists for purchase that will ever compare to the ingenuity of an artist looking for possibility. And just like with writing, the most difficult and most important step is not to produce the perfect final product, but to have a first draft that you can look at and see for its true potential. Because when you're creating, the only rules you have are the rules you place yourself. Sounds are not disposable. The only limit to a sound's versatility is your ability to reimagine it and to present it to an audience ready to imagine it too. And just to prove that point, here's a sound I recorded on a broken microphone in 2015. I was rummaging through a box of junk that I found in my closet. Now that you've got that in your ear, you think it sounds familiar?
Well, thanks for listening to this episode of Soundboard. I hope we were able to provide some insight into why your voice sounds the way that it does, and that even if it's not what you thought, it's entirely unique and can be perfect for the right performance.
You can find links to the gear we used and the sources we referenced for today's episode in the show notes or on our blog post at austinaudiolab.com. This is the Austin Audio Laboratory, signing off for now.